Jimmie currently sits fifth in points with one win this season. Just talk a little bit about the chase thus far and how you feel coming into Kansas this weekend.
I feel good about our mile-and-a-half stuff, and after reviewing things coming here with Chad during the week and again this morning, I think we're a lot smarter with our mile-and-a-half stuff and should have a really, really strong showing here. So excited to get on track. It's back to the old format, which I feel is a better use of our time and our tires and resources that we have at track, where we have qualifying practice for qualifying, and we come back and have race practice tomorrow. So I feel very good about the schedule, which may sound odd, but there's a lot of decisions that have to be made when you've got to post a fast time. All your practice is on one day versus you're qualifying, making virtually one lap on a Saturday, and then come back and race. Where's the track at? What adjustments? So all that stuff has been challenging throughout the year, and I'm happy to see kind of a standard schedule, if you will, back on the books for this weekend.
Okay, we'll open it up for questions for Jimmie. Please raise your hand. We'll get a wireless mic to you. We'll start with Claire, go to Kenny, and then Shannon.
Claire B. Lang, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. Jack Roush was talking about going to Carl after making the mental error and saying, okay, now you've passed a bunch of cars, you've got to get used to that on pit road, but don't speed. Talk about making mental errors and how much you spend thinking about that one little thing that you know how to do but might screw up just because there's so much going on.
Yeah, I mean, we walk such a fine line on all aspects of the track that a small error, it can be so costly. And even though we do it week after week, our job is to make up as much time as we can on pit road. And I don't know what led to Carl's mistake, if he forgot where the lines were or if he just missed it by 1,000th of a mile an hour. But in the cases where you miss it by 1,000th of a mile an hour, we're looking at the lights on our dash and just trying to, however they're set up, if it's all green or red or whatever it may be, and you're just staring at those little lights trying to hit it perfectly. And over the course of pit road, you can make up second and a half if you do it right. And on the racetrack, that's 2-3 spots at times, depending on where you're running. So long story short, we walk that balance all the time, and when you make a mistake, you try to learn from it. Not that we all do, and when you make a mistake again the second time, you're even more upset with yourself. And for the way I handle it is when I make a mistake, I try to evaluate it, think it through, and then try to recognize it when it's coming up again in the future. And sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't, but that's just part of it.
Okay, Kenny, go ahead with your question.
Kenny Bruce, Scene Daily. Jimmie, you mentioned in your opening statements that you get better use of your time with this weekend schedule because you will be able to qualify today, practice 2 times tomorrow. Do you feel like that provides for a better or a more exciting race on Sunday when you have that schedule as opposed to having to qualify and not touching the car again until you go out on Sunday?
I'm trying to think of which hat to wear, because the only way I see it is as a competitor, and it's so tough to do all of your race practice on Friday and kind of help rubber in the track and then guess where the track's going to be come Sunday when you're back on the track. And weather conditions change a lot. Totally different. So from a competitor standpoint, I think it's tough and exciting in a way that we don't want it to be exciting. If it puts on a better show for the fans, which I don't know how that really plays out, then it's probably needs to stay that way because we need to do everything we can to put on a great show. But I don't know how it looks from the grandstands, so that's the only catch there.
Okay, we'll take a question from Shannon, come back up to Lewis, then back to Mike.
Shannon Spake, ESPN. In Chicago, you told me that you wanted to be the driver with the target on your back. How close are you now to being back in that position? We're
close, and to not be a smartass on you. We're 13 points away from being that guy, and that's really what my goal is and where I want to be. I think that a driver, people argue the point that is it good to be under the radar or be out in front? And in a 10-race format, if you're the guy set in the way and you continue to put distance between yourself and second, you gain an advantage at that point. And that's the advantage I want to have. And I hope to get there after this weekend or be even closer yet, because people also do pay attention to the momentum you have and where you're going. And if we can continue to close that gap, I hope that we can find some something positive out of that to send a message and to keep things going.
Okay, we'll take our next question from Lewis.
Louis Frank Reuters. Earlier, a question came up about attracting younger fans, and you've heard these questions before. Now, you raced in the Race of Champions, kind of alternative kind of racing. Would you like to see either, if it's not a points-paying race, maybe another division? Do you think that might be a way to attract younger fans? Or if there was some kind of points-paying, would that alienate the traditional NASCAR fans to see some kind of jumps or slides or whatever in hot cars?
Yeah, I think that you'll bring in a different demographic. I feel, and it's because of the way I grew up going to races, that you become a race fan at a young age. You become a fan of whatever sport at a young age with your dad. And that's the way it worked for me. We didn't go to baseball games. We didn't go to football games. We went to racetracks. And I think it starts at a very young age. Now, a developed demographic, if you mentioned the sliding and jumping, if it's a rally demographic, I don't know how big that is, but sure, it wouldn't hurt to tie that into our sport. But the big numbers, I think, start at a young age in creating a racing fan versus a baseball fan or a football fan. And that's, I can't thank my dad enough for dragging me all over. And if my grades were up, he'd pick me up on Wednesday early and we'd go to one short track and watch sprint cars. If it was a Friday, we'd run up to Ventura or Ascot, wherever it was. And I became a fan at a young age through that.
Okay, we'll take our next question from Mike.
Mike Muller, MikeMuller.net. The National Hockey League's opening this week, and the star player is still out with a concussion from January. The USA Today, I think, had an article yesterday about football helmets with little dots on them, so you can tell where you got hit and how hard you got hit. In this sport, you used to get your bell rung all the time, but that doesn't seem to be a factor anymore. Are the helmets better? Are you guys better protected? Or are you just hiding it better? When was the last time you had your bell rung?
Yeah, I think that it's actually quite a few components to our sport that have lowered the concussion rate, even the fatality standpoint. I mean, we look at the threshold and the impact that was estimated for Earnhardt's crash, and then now that we have the data recorders, and you can see that we are well in excess of that, and guys aren't even losing consciousness or breaking shoulders. We used to break shoulders just because of a seat design. So we have come a long way, and there is a lot of technology out there that can be applied to other sports, and I'm happy to see it. And people love the crashes, people love big hits in football, but still, you've got to keep the athletes safe and protect their lives, their families, and put on a good show as well. So, helmets. To a certain degree, you look at what soft walls have done for us. There might be something to consider in the boards at a hockey game. If people really break down the fundamentals of where injuries are coming from, there's a lot of data out there. And in our sport, that data was there. We kind of looked at it, but for a long time we thought, well, it's the option the driver can take, and we'll just let it be there. We're not going to change. It wasn't until NASCAR really got serious about things and started implementing it, and also took the loss of the greatest driver out there, Dale Earnhardt, for us to say, hey, Superman essentially has been killed. We need to wake up. And I remember the Hans device being carried around in the garage area years before Earnhardt's crash, and we all looked at it and went, I've been through a bad wreck. I don't need that. So I think the leagues need to get more involved and really spearhead and lead technology, safety and technology together, and implement it into the regulations.
Okay, we'll take our next question from Nate, then go to Shannon and Randy.
Nate Ryan, USA Today. Jimmy, clearly this counting you out after 2 races has been a source of amusement for you, the way you kind of keep needling us about it. But has it also been a source of motivation for the team? I mean, is the team fed off of that at all, that you guys were counted out by so many people allegedly after 2 races?
We haven't talked about it in the team too much, but for myself, I've been very fortunate over the last 5 years to be in front of all of you and answer questions, and I've always said it's not over till it's over, even when we've had huge points leads. And I don't know if people believe it. They're, it's a slam dunk, you're just going through the motions. This is racing. Anything can and will happen in racing. And I think that there's more of me trying to prove that point than anything. And with that being said, yeah, we've closed it up to 13 out and we're in 5th, but it can go the other way. I mean, there's no guarantees we're going to keep going forward. And that's the point I guess I'm trying to make, is that this is racing, and with 10 races, 43 guys on track, 500-mile events, there's a lot that can go right and wrong. And it's just not over until Homestead.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Just want to get your thoughts on Carl. We know that he is, in the past has been very strong towards the end of the year. We saw what he was able to accomplish last week when he was kind of backed into a corner. We saw that what the finish between you guys here at Kansas a couple of years ago. What makes him such a threat for this year's championship?
Yeah, I think that Carl and Bob have been through a lot together. And you think where Roush was a year and a half, 2 years ago, those two stayed together, worked through it. Even at one point they were split up and still found a way to work together again and get back together. And I think their strength is a group. Is something that's really needed as you get into a chase battle and fighting for it. The confidence they have in one another helped them get through the speeding penalty they had and make up a lot of positions in a short time on the racetrack at Dover. So there's that strength, I think, within the team, and it's those two together. And then the team, falls in behind it. But they've been through a lot together, and that's something that I look at and consider a huge strength of theirs.
Okay, we'll take our next question from Randy, then come back up to Lewis.
Yeah, Jimmy. Randy Kovitz, Kansas City Star. Off the track, I'm doing a piece on Jeff Gordon, going to the Congo, going to Rwanda, all these missions he's on right now at age 40 here. Could you just y'all do good work in the community and foundations, but can you talk about Jeff? Racing's kind of come together and doing all these things off the track for humanity.
For humanity. I think that Jeff has done I'm trying to think about Earnhardt in his appeal to mainstream. I guess the King, Earnhardt, then Gordon, they were able to tap into mainstream in a unique way and help bridge motorsports to mainstream. And Jeff has done that. Jeff has had a lot of great opportunities that he's taken advantage of. And at the end of the day, has done a lot of good for people. And has done a lot of good for himself and our sport to help it be recognized in such a global mainstream appeal. So when I see the Clinton Initiative that he's a part of and the roster that they have, he is in there with mainstream faces and celebrities and across the board. So that's something he's done a very, very good job with, and has been able to cross over and do a lot of good in a lot of areas.
Go ahead, Lewis.
Lewis, Frank Reuters. At New Hampshire, you and Chad had some sharp radio, or maybe you had some sharp radio comments. What do you do afterwards? Because obviously at Dover, things went a lot smoother and you were a lot more in the race. But I mean, what do you do after a tough race? Not the milk and cookies of years ago, but what do you do to kind of like say, oh man, it was a tough day, and next race, move on? What do you and Chad do?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about stuff all the time, good and bad. After good races and bad races, and truthfully, if you had a microphone on the sidelines and heard a quarterback head coach conversation, I'm sure it'd be a lot more sharp and pointed than what I said to him. And then other drivers, there's a lot that's said out there, and I think people overreacted. And Chad has never been a good cheerleader, and I just kind of needed to remind him of that at New Hampshire. So it's just stuff, We work together so closely, and we both want to win so badly. He can't help but push the radio button at times and say what's on his mind, and I'm already living it and thinking it, and at times I don't need to hear it. And that was one of those times where I was like, okay, enough. That's it. I'm doing all I can in here. Cheerleading is not helping. It's hurting. Let's eliminate that. So just stuff. We just wanted to keep you all entertained, I guess. Good.
Go ahead with your next question.
Jimmy, in the back. Greg Eklund, Kansas Public Radio. The Speedway has a monumental moment tonight with its first night race. From your perspective, I know you answer the bell when it's ringing, but what are the differences between the atmosphere of a day race versus a night race?
I think that it's more entertaining for a couple reasons. The speeds are up. People are used to a night race format, especially the hardcore racers that grew up racing at short tracks or going to short tracks and watching. And then another component that I like is that the area you need to focus on is lit. This racing surface with the race cars is lit, and it makes things look a little bit cooler, if you will. It's tough from a competitor's standpoint to practice in the day like they are right now and then come back and race at night, but it's the same for everyone, and a challenge that you just have to figure out and make the most of.